I've been recently hired as the executive director for the nonprofit, the name of which is the Center for Sustainable and Cooperative Culture. It used to be named Dancing Rabbit Inc., but recently, just in the past year, we renamed it the Center for Sustainable and Cooperative Culture to try to tell folks a little bit more about what the nonprofit does and what we're here for. The nonprofit was originally formed as the 501c3 to be the parent organization for the 501c2 land trust that holds the title and is the land trust for the land that Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage is on. And the focus of the nonprofit for the past 19 years has been the education and outreach and research. And so it's spreading to the world and having more of a global influence and wider reach in terms of what Dancing Rabbit Ecovillage is doing and trying to make some of the lessons and the things that we're doing here in the village consumable and understandable for people in other places. In 2013, I was hired as the correspondent, which does the general incoming email and also handles correspondence about the visitor program, which is the primary recruitment tool for the village, but it's also the thriving program here at Dancing Rabbit and for the nonprofit. We have the most people come here per year through the visitor program and learn about sustainable living and what they can do to bring that home. The nonprofit does advocacy for sustainability, both by bringing it to the awareness of the population at large through our mailing list, and also we have a weekly column that folks write about life at Dancing Rabbit, but also within that is advocacy for sustainability, for sustainability and community. Why would people want to live this way? And so we're sharing that message through our different avenues for communication, and also at the same time having a focus on education. And we bring folks here through the visitor program, but we also bring youth groups here and education groups. We bring school groups that want to come to Dancing Rabbit, and then there's also folks who want to do research. What is the impact of living in this different way, and how does that impact different parts of what might happen in the wider world if more folks chose to live this way? So we sponsor research, and we've been doing a lot of quantitative research on our ecological impact, but there's also a lot of qualitative research around theory and what the ramifications might be for market and consumer economy type stuff. Things at Dancing Rabbit function at a pretty high level. I think that even though there's always room for improvement, I feel like there's a clear enough process for decision making and for putting through process and changes in those agreements and process. And I think that's something that I didn't see as much in the other communities that I lived at. And there's also a sense of connection. Dancing Rabbit still has a value for relationships. And I think the kitchen cooperatives that people eat in, that shared communal eating is something that really nourishes those friendships that make a big difference in terms of what it's like in the room when we come to talk about decisions. My favorite things about Dancing Rabbit are being more connected to the natural environment and more connected in more varied ways with the people around me. And so in my previous life, I just knew people in a more one-dimensional way. Like, this is my coworker, this is my neighbor, this is the person who serves me at the restaurant that I go to. But here, all of those can be one person. And so I get to know different sides of the human beings that are here. And they also get to know those different sides of me, which can lead towards challenges, but it also breeds a bigger sense of compassion. When I know what's going on in a person's home life or in their family life, I tend to greet them with a bigger sense of compassion when I see them in a meeting, or I have a sense of, oh, they might be having a hard time because this is going on for them. So that more holistic view of the human beings around me also contributes to a sense of goodwill and compassion that I feel for other people. And having relationships with the trees and getting to see how the moon changes in its different phases is something that I didn't experience as deeply in other places. And it's beautiful to watch what happens in terms of the natural environment and the human environment when we have that longer sustained relationship over time. And far and away, one of my favorite things about living here is the kids. Just being able to see them growing up in this environment where they're free to play, but also learning about the world around them is beautiful to see their development. And I also love that in my relationships with the children here, that I don't have to be that one-dimensional adult that just asks them how school is going, but I can get to be someone who is with them and maybe helps mediate a conflict between a couple of them, or I can be the go-to and be helping to support or play games with some of them during different nights of the year. So I feel like I get to have relationships with these young people as they're coming into their own in the world, and that's enriching. And I think that's one of the biggest gifts that Dancing Rabbit offers to people is intergenerational living, and what we can contribute to people in different phases of life. For me, I think that community is important for the world because we're in this phase where we've been in a hyper-individualist culture, and it's a lot about me and mine, and there's a tend towards the ego and the selfishness dominating. But that tends to fractionate our own sense of wholeness and our own sense of fulfillment and well-being. And I think there's a deeper sense of fulfillment that one can get when they're connected to a group and willing to sacrifice a little bit of the personal selfish desire in order to come back to a sense of what's best for the whole. And so there's this possibility for a sense of connection and a sense of personal happiness and thriving and well-being. But it's also true that the earth would be in a much better state of health if we were willing to consider things beyond our selfish, narrow interests. And so I think it's important for the health of the earth, but tied into the health of the earth is the health of the beings living on it. So the animals, the plants, the people, I think will all benefit from us choosing to not just stick with the narrow, hyper-individualist focus, but actually having the frame of mind to go, oh, can I see the bigger picture? What's best for the whole? And then when I start to ask myself that question, what's best for me shifts as well a little bit. So I notice that evolution just in terms of what I want for myself when I'm considering the other implications involved. The aspects of Dancing Rabbit that I feel have the most potential to teach and transform the world are considering other people in our decisions, but it's also a getting to know one's neighbors in a deeper way. It's hard to say what the most powerful things are. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, there's so many possibilities, but I think what's often pointed out as one of the biggest things that Dancing Rabbit can do is to teach people what it can be like to live more simply. But I think on an even more important level, it's that we can live lives that are fulfilled on an inner level and have strong interpersonal connection while doing it, and have lives that demonstrate sustainability. And so there's this threefold level that I think that Dancing Rabbit can be an example of, where we're living more in harmony and in consideration of the earth, considering the ecological impact of things, but also having rich, vibrant relationships with the other beings around us, and at the same time feeling really complete and healthy within myself, that inner sustainability. And so I think that Dancing Rabbit could benefit the world by showing what it's like to live both in physical, interpersonal, and inner sustainability, and that you don't have to give up one to get another of them, that actually sustainability requires all three to be functioning at its highest level. And that's my hope of what Dancing Rabbit can be a demonstration project of for the world. The founders never seemed to want this to be a charismatic leader-led community, and always had a value towards setting things up so that they would continue even after they left. And I think there has been a shift in the culture since they've left, but there's certainly a sense of, and I think it's interesting that it coincides with Dancing Rabbit turning 18, 18, 19, coming of age, and the last founder left around that 18th birthday time. And so I think there is a sense of Dancing Rabbit getting to define itself more as an adult on its own terms, and seeing if it can fly as it leaves the nest sort of thing. Even though we're not going anywhere, we're staying right here. There's still that self-definition, self-actualization process happening that I think has been important also for the sense of shared empowerment and shared responsibility among the other members of the community. That sense of, if the founders aren't here, who's going to do this? It has to be one of us. One of our members passed away this summer, and it was, I would call it an initiation point for the community, and having that sense of being able to both be present at the passing of someone, but also take responsibility for what happens after that point of death, and seeing that that person, co-creating their funeral and their celebration of life, and also where that person gets laid to rest, is something that was hugely empowering, but also I think helps us see through where things have been taken from us in a way that we've sacrificed some of what can be meaningful or what can be valuable in that process. I think there was a huge sense of value, certainly that I got, but I have the sense that for the whole community, that was a really empowering sense of being able to take back this process that has been shrouded and a little bit hidden and obscured, and being able to reclaim it for the process of, we can become more connected through it, but we also get to confront our own fears and do our own personal work in the process of doing that, and create a greater bond as a community. I certainly think that the community is stronger for having gone through that and handling it the way that we did. I kept saying at the time, oh, this is the silver lining to death, is the level of connection that can happen with the human beings that I'm next to and experiencing this with. And I don't think I would have experienced that if it had been in a different setting as much. I haven't experienced that in when other folks have died that haven't been in that community setting. That's currently the biggest, is the executive director hat. I've also been on the visitor team, which is a committee that handles the visitor program. So I've been really involved for the last 3 years in making the visitor program something that functions more seamlessly and also something that works better for outside folks coming into it. And that's been a lot of my focus. And part of my desire there is to be at the bridge point between Dancing Rabbit and people who are interested in community or interested in living at Dancing Rabbit. So I have this passion, and I often find myself on that bridge point going, okay, great, you're thinking of walking over this threshold. Let me support you in doing so and make sure we have a good program for you to come into. And also, I have a passion for folks having those transformative moments in the visitor program or in whatever program it is or whatever experience it is that they're having here, having that aha moment that can change a whole lifetime and the choices that happen there forward. I have a big passion for helping make those moments happen. Someone on Pet Committee would know more about it, but there's different numbers we allow in terms of numbers of dogs in the village, but also numbers of dogs that can be free roaming or that can go about the village without a leash. And then we have a certain number of dogs who are kept on leash. And we don't want it to get too out of balance, because if we had a number of free roaming dogs, there could be pack behavior and other negative impacts on our neighbors. And the cats we currently have a policy that the cats stay indoors during ground nesting bird season, because the cats are a big predator for the ground nesting birds, and they're sort of an artificial predator because they're pets of humans that are moving into the land. And I think it's a great place where our process and our policy comes up, because we've had a lot of discussions over the years trying to hold people with really different perspectives and yet still manage to have relationships with those people at the same time. I think that's a good sign when the community doesn't fall apart over one big issue that we're all in disagreement on, but can come through it and get stronger. When Hassan and I first arrived, we were work exchanging for the village, so our fees were covered by the folks we were work exchanging for. I work exchanged for the Milkweed Mercantile when we first arrived, and Hassan did building work. But since then, I got one of the few positions in the nonprofit as the correspondent, which generated some of my income, but I was still leaving for part of the year to go nanny or do other odd jobs elsewhere to get the income that I needed to live here. But with getting the programs director job and then the executive director job most recently, that covers 100% of the income that I need to live here. And Hassan is a natural builder, so he's self-employed, and he builds spec houses. So he gets to build his dream. He gets to dream it and then create it and then hope that it will sell. And so there's this interesting synergy between how he's building houses and my work in the visitor program is hoping to bring people in, some of which will eventually hopefully buy those houses.
Awesome.
Yeah. And that's part of the beauty of it too, is that we get to support each other's work in different ways. And that sort of knowing that the more people that move to the village, the more work there is for Hassan ongoingly, is kind of a nice sidelight to living in community and having those interrelated lives. There's a desire for Dancing Rabbit to grow. It's even stated in our mission statement. And I also in myself have had a deep trust in the process unfolding with a logic that is beyond me. So there's some part of me that's like, maybe it's not a problem. Maybe we're exactly the right size and we'll grow at exactly the right size. And so I tend to come back to that viewpoint while also holding the both and. And this is where I think the both and can come in of like, I can hold that and I can also do things that will help or that will detract from that population growth. And so holding both of those, a trust and a faith, you might say, in the process, and choosing to engage in a way that I think will bring a certain beneficial result. Hassan completed this house really quickly. It was completed in under 4 months from when he started, when he broke ground. And he used upcycled pallets and rigid foam for insulation. And then the roof is all timbers from nearby land. And the roof is insulated with rigid foam as well. And then did light clay straw and then natural plaster on the outside. And he's been experimenting with different sorts of natural plaster. And so sometimes our house changes its outer skin from year to year because he's experimenting with a different sort of weather-resistant Elise or some other sort of natural plaster. So it's a bit of an experimentation house, but it's also the first house that he built start to finish. And we've been living in it for the past 4 years, coming up on 4 years now, and it's been perfect. And we had a little bit of discussion first of like, okay, great, let's build the next house and go for the next big thing. But we realized that we love this house and we love the little pot of land, the warren that we're on right now. And so we don't actually want to build a bigger house quite yet. My son and I chose to do a 6-year commitment ceremony because we felt it was authentic for us. And that's part of what I think Dancing Rabbit can be a model for, is living a life that feels authentic to oneself and to one's own choosing, and not having to follow the formula subscribed by or prescribed by mainstream culture. And so we chose to do a 6-year commitment ceremony because that felt like a stretch, but it also felt like we wanted a container that felt solid to grow into and to support each other in. And we chose to have that ceremony at Hummingbird Community in New Mexico, which is where we first met. But we invited everyone from Dancing Rabbit, and I think there were 17 folks from Dancing Rabbit who came, most of which came on the train. So there was this beautiful process of community in motion, community taking a field trip, if you will, to come out to our commitment ceremony. And they all traveled on the train together and traveled back. And it was beautiful to see the way that this community supported our ceremony there, but also interplayed with the other communities. And our experience of the commitment ceremony is that there was enough folks who had a high literacy of community and ways of interpersonal speaking, that there was a really high degree of depth at the ceremony and in the way that other folks were showing up with vulnerability and authenticity, and the meaning of the ceremony just magnified exponentially because of the folks from community who we feel were able to hold that strong space for us. It's really powerful and really fun to see what people came. We noticed that most of the folks that came were either connected to us through our kitchen co-op or through our work, through the fellow folks who also work for the nonprofit where I work, and then also through men's group. The men's group here is such a force, and it was a huge number of men from men's group who came out to support us in the commitment ceremony. So it seemed like another example of how strong that's been for the community. What I would change about Dancing Rabbit if I could, I would create a stronger scene in terms of the kitchen co-ops. I know that they're trying to do that right now with a Common House kitchen co-op, but since living here, I've really seen how eating together, I knew this before moving to Dancing Rabbit, that eating together is a powerful way to form bond and connection with people, but now I really see the impact of it. And I think that it's really important for folks who move to Dancing Rabbit to have those strong connections. That's what helps get folks through the difficulty of figuring out how to make money and the difficulty of a new culture. And I think that forming those strong friendships and relationships is what gets people through those difficult times. It certainly what helped get me through that difficult time in the first couple of years of moving here. And so having a more vibrant kitchen cooperative scene with selections that work for folks in terms of their dietary needs, but that also provide that emotional and social net for people. I think that's huge in terms of helping folks transition to Dancing Rabbit and stay and live and thrive here once they're here. I'm trying to think back to what my process was. There was certainly a level of coming here and getting in touch with the potential of Dancing Rabbit, and then going through the contraction period. And I think that happens even in relationships too, of like, what's possible? And then the shadow phase of like, oh, this isn't everything that I dreamed it would be, and the disappointing phase. And that can last for years for some people, depending on what it is. And I had a strong commitment to work through the stuff that was coming up for me while staying here. But I think that there can be this time period where people are going through, this isn't everything that I wanted it to be. The life that I just came from looks so much more attractive, hindsight, rose-colored retrospection or something. And then the realities of living here can be difficult, especially in terms of the economics and figuring out navigating the cultural shift. And I think that can really hit ahead in terms of 2 years and starting to think about what else could I be doing or where else could I be happier. That's when the questioning might be strongest and creates the biggest exit door or something. My vision for the future of Dancing Rabbit is that the sustainability scene in terms of physical sustainability gets stronger, and we get more grants and possibilities to actually test some of the sustainable technologies that people have tried and want to try on here, and that we're stronger stronger in terms of our physical sustainability, my vision is also that we continue to grow in terms of the interpersonal relationships. And I think a lot of that work happens in men's group, but it's also started to happen through the matrix process training that we brought in and these other tools in community that have made our interrelationships stronger. So figuring out how to navigate interpersonal dynamics with more vulnerability, with more depth, with more compassion, and more desire for connection, and really bringing that desire that I think most humans have for connection, being able to bring it into fruition in a way that's really beautiful and even more beautiful. I think we can multiply that here at Dancing Rabbit. And also that my vision is for the nonprofit to become an even better catalyst for folks in the outside world to learn about Dancing Rabbit, to understand why they would bother making sustainable choices for their life, and also to come and get educated on what we're doing here and either take these tools back home or take home the inspiration that they can apply in their own environment. We don't intend to be a place where folks say, okay, this is what they're doing, I want to go home and do it the exact same way. I want Dancing Rabbit to be a place where people can come and get inspired so that they can see what are the things that I can implement in my home or community that will work really well here. Sustainability is not a one-size-fits-all sort of prescription. It takes a lot of different people with a lot of different sorts of inspiration to figure out what's going to be most healthy for the earth and the beings living on it. Not everybody needs to start living the way that folks live at Dancing Rabbit, but come and try it on and see what feels good and what feels doesn't. And this is an experimental culture, but I think the United States is also a larger experimental culture. So I think that there is that attitude at large in terms of what could work or what could I apply here that could work in my home or community. And I hope that happens. And it certainly seems from my perspective that more and more people are feeling the desire and the hunger for living in a way that's more connected with themselves, connected with each other, and connected with the earth. And my hope is that Dancing Rabbit can show one way of how we can live in that more connected way, with the hope of inspiring it to multiply and adapt to different environments across the globe. I don't know why this is coming up, but what's coming up was just thinking back to what got me through the difficult chapter when I was in that 2-year mark and thinking, oh, this isn't everything I wanted it to be, and thinking about other places I could go. And I set an intention that anything that I needed for myself and my growth was here. And it's everywhere that I go, but anything that I need to do in terms of my learning or my personal development can be found here in this laboratory. And that my life will always manifest these circumstances for me to grow and evolve and adapt. And that I don't need to go somewhere else to get the lessons that I came here to get. That I can stay right here. And so maybe the thing that's happening with all of its difficulty and all of its uncertainty is exactly the right thing to catalyze the next level of evolution in myself. And I felt that coming true this year with the executive director position and commitment ceremony with Hassan. I felt like this is what can happen when someone sticks through that hard time and stays with a true intention through it. And that possibility coming to fruition of those dreams that I had for myself of like, if I just get through this tough time, there'll be something good on the other side. And I had this feeling this year of like, I was right. and having the feeling this year of like, this is the life I've dreamed of. And it's not the way I thought it would look. And I think often that's a gap that people have of, this is the way it will look when I'm living happy and thriving and connected and fulfilled. And being able to go for the feeling and know that feeling on the inside, I'm happy, I'm thriving, I'm alive, I'm fulfilled, I'm connected, and dropping the expectation or the attachment to what that actually looks like in terms of where I'm at or the people around me or what work I'm doing. I think that's a key thing for other people to learn in terms of being able to fulfill their own happiness desires.